Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below, because what you're about to hear is a true story that turned an ordinary morning at JFK Airport into an international scandal. It started with a single growl. A German shepherd named Peter suddenly stopped mid-patrol, staring down a black designer suitcase. His handler ordered him to move. He refused, and then he bit. What was inside that case didn't just break protocol, it shattered every assumption about what's allowed to pass through international borders. This isn't just a story about a working dog. It's about instinct, courage, and a secret the world was never supposed to find. Stay with us. You won't believe what Peter uncovered next. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport barely softened the bitterness of the early January chill. Officer Emily Carter zipped her Navy 9-unit jacket as she stepped onto the polished floors of Terminal 4, Peter at her side, silent, focused, unwavering. Peter, a German shepherd, with alert amber eyes and a coat that shimmered black and tan under harsh lighting, walked in perfect sync with her left leg. No leash tug, no wasted movement. Just a seamless rhythm between handler and nine, a bond formed over hundreds of hours, dozens of missions, and something more unspoken. Outside, the wind rattled the massive glass panels, foretelling the season's first true snowstorm. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of industrial cleaning agents, burnt coffee, and the tangy swirl of perfumes from duty-free shops. Boarding calls echoed overhead in a blur of international accents. Travelers rushed by, some clutching briefcases, others dragging toddlers or balancing neck pillows and passports. "Looks like it's going to be one of those days," Emily muttered under her breath, glancing down at Peter. He gave a soft grunt in acknowledgement. At 5:17 a.m., the airport was already buzzing. Her earpiece crackled. "All units, heads up. Interpol just flagged credible intel. Wildlife trafficking activity is likely within 48 hours. Source, Southeast Asia routes." Emily's eyes narrowed. Wildlife trafficking wasn't new, but it was rare at this level. And now, with diplomatic flights returning post-lockdown, things were bound to get messy. She responded quickly. "Copy that. 9-unit in terminal. Standing by." Peter's ears twitched slightly. He always seemed to know when things shifted. As she passed Gate 7, a voice came through the comms again. "Emirates Flight 203 landed. 6 in first class. Sweep requested." Without hesitation, Emily angled toward the customs corridor where international first-class passengers were filtering in. Peter adjusted smoothly with her, his pace never faltering. The passengers came in waves, men in crisp suits, women in designer coats, luggage rolling beside them like silent shadows. Most barely noticed the 9-unit gliding past, but Peter was scanning, not with his eyes, but with his nose, his real weapon, trained to detect explosives, narcotics, biological signatures, even the most chemically masked animal matter. Emily let him lead, hand resting lightly on her hip, close to the leash clip, but not gripping it. Peter didn't need direction. Then he stopped, dead in his tracks. It wasn't dramatic, no bark, no lunge. Just a sudden halt, body tense, tail stiff, eyes locked. In front of him sat a black leather suitcase, large, sleek, clearly expensive. One of those handcrafted European models that screamed power and privilege. Its owner stood just feet away, a man in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, dark tailored suit, polished shoes, and a diplomatic passport open in hand. He glanced down, noticing Peter's stare. A faint crease appeared between his brows. Emily stepped forward, her voice neutral. "Sir, may I speak with you for a moment?" The man didn't flinch. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Routine check," she said calmly. "My 9 has shown interest in your luggage." The man glanced at the suitcase, then back at Peter, who hadn't moved a muscle. "This is a diplomatic pouch," he said firmly, lifting the passport. "Dr. Adam Niles, Ministry of Cultural Relations, Gulf Commonwealth." Emily took the ID with practiced ease. "Understood, Dr. Niles. Still, I'd like to take a closer look, just a moment of your time." Something flickered in his expression, not fear, not anger, something tighter, controlled, practiced. I'm on official business. Meeting State Department in 2 hours. This is highly inappropriate. Emily maintained a calm smile. And I appreciate that. However, my partner is trained to respond only under very specific stimuli. If he alerts, we follow protocol. Behind them, other passengers slowed, eyeing the exchange. Phones came out, always ready to catch drama. Peter gave a low growl. It was deep quiet, barely audible beneath the hum of terminal noise. But to Emily, it roared. Peter didn't growl often, and when he did, it wasn't a guess. Peter, heel, she commanded sharply. He didn't budge. Emily's heart skipped. Something was off. Peter had gone through 4 tours of duty with her. Trained, tested, battle-hardened. He never disobeyed without reason. She looked back at Dr. Niles, who now seemed visibly agitated. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. "Please remove your animal," he said curtly. "This is a gross violation of international law." Before she could respond, Peter moved. He lunged not at the man, but straight for the suitcase. Teeth bared, he sank his jaws into the side of the leather and yanked it toward himself, growling louder this time, his body anchored like a steel cable. Gasps erupted. Several travelers stumbled back. Someone yelled. Security radios crackled. "Peter, release!" Emily barked. He let go but didn't retreat. Instead, he stood guard over the case, positioned between it and Niles, chest out, eyes locked on the man, as if daring him to try something. Emily's supervisor arrived at a jog. "Stand down," he hissed. "That's a diplomat." But Emily wasn't listening. She crouched beside Peter, noting the puncture marks in the suitcase. The leather had torn and something was glinting underneath, not the expected inner lining. No, this was reinforced mesh, woven metallic fibers. Dr. Niles's voice rose, now panicked. "You've assaulted an official diplomatic courier. I demand to speak with your superior." Her earpiece buzzed again. Customs and Border can't verify his diplomatic pouch. State has no scheduled meeting with him today. Emily straightened slowly, her voice steady. "Sir, I'm going to need to see documentation for that specific suitcase." Niles froze, just for a breath. Just long enough for a trained eye to catch it. The mask slipped. That was the moment Emily knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even about Peter anymore. Something far bigger was hiding behind that polished smile and expensive leather case. And Peter. Peter had known from the moment that man walked off the plane. Transition. Before anyone could stop him, Peter lunged again, this time with full force, tearing deeper into the case, as if he already knew exactly what was inside. What they would find next would shake the entire airport to its core. "Officer Carter, stand down." Now, the voice sliced through the growing tension like a blade. Captain Howard's tone was clipped, authoritative, and layered with the kind of pressure that came from a chain of command, being rattled by phone calls from above. Emily didn't blink. Peter stood squarely between the suitcase and its owner, unmoving, silent, watchful. Every fiber of his body was alert. The growl had stopped, but the warning still pulsed in the air, like static. "This man is a diplomat," Howard continued, lowering his voice. "If you push this any further, we're stepping into jurisdictional hell. You know the rules, Carter. Step back. Let it go." Emily looked up from where she knelt beside Peter. She heard the words, but she also saw Peter's stance, and that told her something else entirely. "No, sir," she said evenly. "Not yet." Howard's jaw tightened. "You want to explain that insubordination? I'd rather explain why we ignored a Federal 9 alert and let something walk through our gates that could have killed people, or smuggled something worse. He's alerting hard. This isn't random." Before her supervisor could respond, Peter let out a low, guttural sound, not aggressive, but insistent. His nose hovered over the torn seam he'd created in the suitcase. Beneath the shredded leather, glints of something unnatural shimmered under the fluorescent lights, thin mesh, metallic, interwoven. "Reinforcement? Shielding?" Emily rose slowly, her voice calmer now. "I'm requesting immediate confirmation of diplomatic courier paperwork for this item specifically, not his passport, the pouch. It's standard procedure." Dr. Adam Niles, the man in the tailored suit and polished shoes, had been quiet through the exchange, but now his mask began to strain. "There is no need for further documentation," he replied, clipped and confident. "You have my credentials. This is a violation of the Vienna Convention. If you so much as unzip that case, your agency will be dealing with a formal international complaint." Emily didn't move. "We're not unzipping anything. We're requesting paperwork for the pouch. If it's clean, it's clean." "Unbelievable," Niles muttered. The incompetence. But his words trailed off as Peter's teeth sank into the leather once more and pulled not violently, but deliberately. The suitcase groaned. More of the exterior peeled away. Underneath, the strange interior became clearer, silver fabric threaded like armor, matte and smooth. Not padding, not lining. Something far more intentional. Emily stared at it, the weight of it settling over her like ice. 3 years earlier, the Port Authority 9 training center had been colder than she expected. Concrete floors, metal kennels, the constant bark and rattle of nervous, eager dogs waiting to be chosen. She was just a week into her transfer from the military. Her previous partner had died during a desert patrol, an IED that had left nothing behind but silence. The loss still sat in her bones. "You looking for a beginner?" the trainer had asked her. "No," Emily replied. "I'm looking for someone who knows how to listen before barking." The trainer nodded toward a quiet kennel at the far end. "That one? He's smart. Maybe too smart. Flunked out with 3 handlers already. Focuses too much. Can't relax. Won't play. Makes people uncomfortable." Emily stepped closer. Inside, a young German shepherd sat perfectly still, eyes locked onto her, head slightly tilted. No barking, no pacing, just watching. "What's his name?" "Peter." He didn't flinch when she crouched. She whispered, more to herself than to the dog. "You're not a problem to fix, Peter. You're just a solution no one's figured out yet." He blinked once, then stood and pressed his nose to the mesh of the kennel, right where her hand waited. And just like that, he chose her. Now, in the present, Emily's voice was steady. "Captain, I'm not disobeying the chain of command. I'm responding to a definitive 9 alert. Diplomatic or not, we have procedures in place for this exact situation." Howard looked as though he might explode, but before he could issue another order, the radio on his belt crackled. "Dispatch to command, verifying diplomatic manifest." No record of this pouch on the flight declaration. Howard's lips thinned. Niles turned sharply. "That's a mistake." Emily held her ground. "Then it'll be corrected with the paperwork. We'll wait." Niles shifted, something tightening behind his eyes. "You people have no idea who you're dealing with." Peter suddenly growled again, deeper this time. Not a threat, a warning. The suitcase, now visibly torn, sat like a wound exposed, and under the strange woven layer there was something soft, a bulge. Slight movement? Emily's pulse picked up. She stepped closer, crouched again, and carefully lifted the flap of material where Peter had bitten. She didn't touch what was underneath, just looked. And what she saw didn't belong in any piece of luggage. A vent, circular, tiny, silent, designed to regulate temperature and airflow, far too advanced for ordinary transport. Emily stood, "Captain, I don't think this is a pouch." Howard was pale now. "We need clearance before." "No, we need to secure the area." Niles took a step back. Emily's eyes locked on him. "Sir, you're going to need to come with us for further screening. I won't be detained. You have no right." She didn't raise her voice. "We have every right." Security had begun forming a loose perimeter. Bystanders were being moved. Niles's composure cracked as he scanned the terminal for exits. Then Peter barked sharp and sudden. Not a command, a warning. Something was happening inside that suitcase. Emily didn't look at her superior this time. She didn't ask for permission. She simply turned to the nearest customs officer and said, "We need an X-ray scan. Now." Niles lunged toward the suitcase, hand outstretched. Peter intercepted, not with teeth, not with violence. He stepped into the space between them and stood firm, still, a wall of muscle and intuition. Niles froze. And in that moment, Emily saw it, the flicker of fear in a man who had worn arrogance like armor. Not fear of a dog, fear of being exposed. Transition. And as the scan began revealing layers, no one had imagined something stirred beneath the synthetic mesh. Something alive, something hidden. What Peter had sensed all along was about to be revealed. The suitcase was carefully moved to a restricted screening room, 2 security officers flanking either side, Emily walking beside them, her eyes never leaving Peter, whose focus hadn't shifted once since the alert. A bomb squad technician slid on thick gloves as the case was gently set on the scanning table. No one spoke. Even the usual rustle of radios and shuffling boots had quieted, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The technician tapped the monitor, running 3-pass scan, heat, X-ray, molecular mapping. Emily stood back, hand resting near her sidearm, eyes flicking between the suitcase and the screen. Peter sat beside her like a sentinel still, ears perked, tail unmoving. Then the first image appeared. Everyone leaned in. "That's not right," the technician murmured. No readout on the interior. He adjusted frequency and range. The screen refreshed, but showed only blurred masses, nothing distinct. Just dark patches, shadows that shouldn't have been there. Like something was blocking the scan entirely. The tech's voice dropped. "We've got heavy shielding. Lead mesh, multi-layered composite, designed to scatter imaging." Emily exhaled slowly, intentionally concealed. Yes, and expensively. She didn't wait for permission. "We open it. Now." With delicate precision, the technician unclipped the latch and peeled back the ruined leather and internal mesh. The first layer beneath gleamed like metallized fabric, lightweight but unnaturally cool. It wasn't just shielding from scans, it was thermal suppression, blocking, and likely sound insulation too. Then, finally, the core. Everyone in the room froze. It wasn't weapons, not cash, not diamonds or data drives. It was life. Rows of micro-containers, each the size of a lunchbox, neatly arranged in foam cradles. Inside them, movement, breathing, sleeping. The technician stepped back instinctively. What the hell? Emily moved closer. Through the transparent pods, she could see them clearly now, tiny lungs fluttering, chests rising and falling beneath soft feathers and scales. A miniature salamander with fire-red markings curled in a synthetic moss bed. A golden poison dart frog sat motionless in a humidity-controlled micro-tank, its skin glowing faintly under the light. A soft chirp escaped from the far end, a nearly inaudible plea for air, for freedom. A baby bird barely hatched, feathers sparse, eyes shut, lay shivering in one of the far compartments. The pod regulating its airflow beeped erratically. Spix's macaw, a voice whispered. Everyone turned. A woman in a field jacket had just entered the room, clipboard under arm, conservation patches sewn onto her sleeves. She adjusted her glasses, her face pale. "My name's Dr. Rachel Vance," she said, breathless. "I was called by wildlife enforcement." She leaned in to examine the crates, her hands trembling slightly. "These are some of the most endangered species on Earth. This one," she pointed to the newborn bird, "there are fewer than 60 known in the wild." Emily watched as the technician peeled back another section. More animals. An entire row of amphibians, some vibrantly colored, others ghostly pale, resting in what looked like medical-grade life support systems. Oxygen tubes, filtered air, temperature controls, chips embedded in the lining, monitoring systems blinking green and blue like spacecraft dashboards. Whoever built this wasn't an amateur, Dr. Vance said. This is military grade. Designed for long-range smuggling with minimal biological loss. They've miniaturized everything. Emily bent closer. These containers, they're better equipped than some hospitals. The conservationist gave a slow nod. Yes, all that care, all that precision, just to keep them alive long enough to sell to private collectors or harvest them for rare compounds. She moved to the sickly macaw chick. Its tiny chest barely moved. The room had gone so quiet that even the soft whirring of fans sounded deafening. If this bird doesn't get immediate oxygen adjustment and hydration, it won't survive the next hour. The technician handed her a sealed canister. We've got oxygen here. Rachel worked fast, stabilizing the chick's airflow. Everyone watched in silence as the bird's trembles began to slow, its breathing smoothing, ever so slightly. Emily stood frozen for a moment. Then her voice, tight with emotion, broke the quiet. How many would have died if Peter hadn't all of them? Rachel answered. Easily. The containers regulate just enough air to suppress movement, make detection harder. If you'd waited even a few hours. She didn't finish. The technician continued examining compartments. There's something else. He removed a foam panel beneath the last row of containers, revealing a secondary compartment, false bottom. Inside, stacks of documents, sealed plastic packets, and a small, lead-lined box the size of a shoebox. The documents were high-quality forgeries, passports, veterinary permits, customs paperwork. Emily picked one up. It looked real. Barcodes, embossed seals, even signs of wear. They would have passed almost any inspection, she muttered. The technician slowly opened the lead container. Inside, tiny vials, clear liquids, medical-grade cooling gel, biohazard symbols etched into the sides. Don't touch those, he said quickly, motioning to the hazmat specialist nearby. Could be neurotoxins, amphibian-based. Rachel leaned in, her face going ashen. If those are what I think they are, they're harvesting chemical compounds from the poison dart frogs, extracted and weaponized. Emily stared at the gleaming vials. How much damage could that cause? The hazmat specialist answered without hesitation. Enough to paralyze the human nervous system within 30 seconds. Depending on delivery method, lethal. A young officer burst into the room, tablet in hand. Interpol just confirmed ID match on our guy. Adam Niles isn't who he says he is. His real name is Ferd Malik. They've been tracking him for 2 years. Codename, the Curator. Global trafficker specializes in high-value wildlife and biotoxins. Emily stepped back from the table, everything clicking into place like a brutal puzzle. The elaborate shielding, the diplomatic disguise, the custom ventilation pods, the forgeries, the weapons-grade toxins. This wasn't just smuggling, it was organized, funded, directed. Her hand went to her comm. I need to notify DHS. Now. But before she could press transmit, a crash, shouts, the sound of a metal door slamming open. Emily turned sharply. From the one-way mirror that faced the adjacent room, she saw movement. Ferd Malik, no longer calm, no longer measured, was on his feet. His jacket had been removed during screening, but he still wore the air of someone who knew exactly where every exit led. A security officer lunged toward him. Malik sidestepped. Fast. Too fast for someone claiming to be a diplomat. He threw his weight into the officer, knocking him against the wall. Without breaking stride, he slipped toward the secondary exit in the corner of the room, unmonitored. Emily's voice rang through the room. Suspect is fleeing. Southeast door. I need backup now. She didn't wait for confirmation. She bolted, Peter surging to his feet beside her, already moving as if the command had been etched into his very bones. Transition, what had begun with a quiet growl in the terminal, was now exploding into a full-scale manhunt. Malik wasn't just running, he was executing a plan. And Emily knew if he made it outside, they might never catch him again. The emergency stairwell door slammed open as Malik vanished into the lower levels of JFK's operations corridors. The space beyond was dim, industrial concrete walls smeared with oil and exhaust, exposed piping weaving across the ceiling like steel veins. Red emergency lights blinked along the ceiling, casting fleeting shadows. Emily tore down the steps 2 at a time, her boots striking hard against metal. Her ribs burned from exertion, but she didn't slow. Suspect heading toward the service bays. Repeat. Suspect is armed and fleeing toward ground-level vehicle access. She shouted into her radio. She caught sight of Malik ahead, darting into a narrow passage that ran beneath the terminal. Her breath caught not from exhaustion, but from the cold certainty that he knew exactly where he was going. He'd mapped this. He wasn't running in panic. He was following a route. Emily turned the corner just as Malik looked back. In that split second of eye contact, she no longer saw the diplomatic poise or rehearsed civility. What stared back at her was something sharpened by survival and certainty. His hand shot into his coat. She dove sideways. The muffled crack of a shot echoed behind her. A flash of heat tore past her shoulder. She landed hard against a stack of wheeled luggage carts, metal biting into her hip. The air tasted like rust and adrenaline. She rolled quickly, drawing her weapon just in time to see Malik sprinting deeper into the service tunnel. Her radio buzzed with static, too far underground. She reached for the antenna and angled it toward the ceiling, trying to find signal. Nothing. She pushed forward anyway. The tunnel opened into a loading corridor filled with the rhythmic hum of refrigerated trucks and catering carts. Steam hissed from a ruptured pipe above, fogging the air in a white cloud. Malik emerged from the mist like a phantom. He turned sharply, gun raised. Emily raised hers. For a breathless moment, they stood across from each other. Then he moved, not backward, not to escape, but forward. She fired. He ducked behind a forklift, the bullets sparking off metal. She followed, but as she turned the corner, his shoulder slammed into her gut, driving her into the wall. Pain exploded through her torso. The world narrowed. His elbow connected with her ribs, right beneath the vest's edge. Air vanished from her lungs. She gasped, clutching her side, knees buckling. The pistol slipped from her fingers. He reached for something on his belt. She forced herself upright and grabbed at his wrist. The object in his hand glinted a compact black pistol. Sleek. No visible metal. Composite. She recognized it instantly. Designed to evade detection. Military, government level or worse. They struggled. His strength was controlled, efficient, every move deliberate. He wasn't just surviving. He'd been trained to win fights like this. With a violent twist, he broke free and shoved her to the floor. Blood slicked her palm as she gripped her side. Her breath rasped through clenched teeth. Malik backed away, gun raised again. "You can live, officer," he said calmly, almost kindly. "Just stay down." Behind him, one of the catering trucks growled to life. He turned, taking a step toward it, and then it happened. A blur of fur, a flash of teeth, a thundering impact. Peter hit him like a missile. The German shepherd collided with Malik's upper body, jaws locking onto his weapon hand with trained precision. The gun clattered to the ground, skidding across the concrete floor. Malik howled in shock, trying to shake the dog off. Peter didn't let go. His weight drove Malik back into a stack of pallets, toppling them with a crash. Emily forced herself to her feet, staggered forward. Every breath stabbed her ribs like glass, but she crossed the distance and slammed a knee into Malik's thigh, sending him to the ground. He grunted, arms still caught in Peter's iron grip. She reached for the dangling handcuff clipped to her duty belt, snapped it open, and wrestled his free arm behind his back. "Fared, Malik," she panted, tightening the restraint. "You are under arrest." He spat blood to the side. "You have no idea what you've done." She locked the second cuff into place, heart pounding. "I know you were smuggling endangered life and poisons." He smiled, a jagged, chilling thing. "The animals are a means. The real cargo's what you'll never find." Peter held his position, jaws clamped, just firm enough to control. Emily gave the release command. "Peter, heel." He released instantly, retreating to her side. Blood dripped from his muzzle, but his eyes were clear, steady, watching. Malik's phone, still in his coat pocket, buzzed once, Twice. Then again, she retrieved it using a gloved hand. The screen lit up with an incoming message. Extraction team in position. Confirm package status. Emily's stomach turned. They weren't done. This wasn't just about a suitcase. She called in her location, voice sharp and low. Suspect in custody. Armed. Situation contained. But we've got outside coordination. Possibly inbound assets. Peter stood tall beside her, body vibrating with focus, ears flicking toward every faint sound in the corridor. Sirens wailed in the distance, finally reaching the outer perimeter. Emily looked down at Malik, now pinned beneath zip ties, handcuffs, and the weight of failure. "You mapped this airport," she said. "He didn't respond. You planned your extraction." Silence. "You had handlers waiting." His smile returned, but this time it was tired. "Do you really think it ends with me?" Before she could reply, her radio crackled back to life, patchy, but clear enough. Carter, multiple alerts, suspicious vehicles near tarmac, orders coming in, secure all wildlife cargo, federal team en route. She stood, blood still trickling beneath her vest, and looked around at the chaos. The catering truck sat idling, forgotten. The side door swung open slightly, just enough for her to see inside. Unmarked crates, metal cylinders, more pods. Peter let out a low, vibrating growl. She raised her weapon. Clear that truck now. Officers poured in, weapons drawn, flooding the service bay. Malik was lifted to his feet, bound and silent, as the vehicle was searched. More animals, more tools. More proof. And still Peter stared at Malik like he could still sense something deeper, something unfinished. Transition. Even as Malik was dragged away and backup swarmed the site, Peter didn't relax. Because the phone hadn't stopped buzzing, and Emily knew, whatever this was, it went beyond JFK. And it wasn't over. The command center at JFK was transformed almost overnight. What had once been a backroom security office was now buzzing with agents in tactical gear, analysts with screens glowing in front of them, and boxes of seized materials laid out like the wreckage of a criminal empire. The hum of printers, the clatter of boots, the low drone of radios, it all blended into a focused storm of purpose. Fayed Malik sat behind a two-way glass partition, wrists cuffed to a bolted metal table. His suit was torn, hair disheveled, but his eyes remained sharp. He didn't look defeated. He looked like a man calculating how long it would take to rebuild. On a nearby table, his confiscated phone lay connected to a secure federal decryption device. Line after line of encrypted messages scrolled across the screen. Locations, shipment codes, alias names. A DHS agent approached Emily, holding out a tablet. "You're going to want to see this." Emily, now stitched at the side and moving slower than she'd like, leaned over. What she saw made her breath hitch. Lines on a map, 7 countries, dotted with red pins. "All connected to Malik?" she asked. The agent nodded. "According to what we've recovered so far, this single shipment was valued at just over 15 million, but it was only one of many. We've found references to coordinated shipments every quarter for the past 3 years. Species, chemicals, black market buyers, some connected to biomedical labs, others to private collectors, a few even to military contractors." Emily's stomach turned. "And we only found him by accident." The agent shook his head. "We found him because your dog refused to let a system fail." Another tech stepped forward, pale-faced, cradling a small lead-lined container in gloved hands. "We've got a problem," he said tightly. "What is it?" "One of the toxin vials. It's leaking." The room quieted. A team in full HAZMAT suits moved quickly, sealing the compromised container and initiating containment protocols. The air in the room took on a sharper edge, like metal and fear. A specialist scanned the label. "It's batracoxin," he muttered. "What does that mean?" one of the younger officers asked. "It means," the specialist replied, "if this had broken open in an uncontained area, everyone within 20 feet would have collapsed before they realized they were in danger. Full nervous system shut down. No antidote." Emily looked at the small vial, the size of a lip balm tube. now glowing faintly beneath ultraviolet. 30 seconds, the specialist added, almost as an afterthought. That's how long it takes. Across the room, Rachel Vance from Wildlife Enforcement stepped in, her face drawn and exhausted. She carried a printed report and a photograph, an image of a real diplomat, very much alive, currently attending a conference in Geneva. That's the man Malik claimed to be, she said. His identity was stolen 6 months ago. Every credential was forged but verified through intercepted embassy correspondence. It was a flawless impersonation, no red flags until Peter barked. Emily didn't say anything at first. Her eyes lingered on the image, then drifted to the evidence table papers, vials, tranquilizer kits, reinforced containers. She exhaled. He was counting on the process to protect him. Rachel gave a small nod, and it almost did. The conversation was interrupted by a new voice. Officer Carter. Emily turned to see the port director approaching, once a man of stiff handshakes and political courtesy, now visibly shaken and softened. He held out a commendation document, a formal statement of recognition. Exceptional judgment under pressure, he said. You and your 9 partner prevented what could have escalated into a diplomatic crisis, or worse. We don't even know how far this network extends yet, but you stopped the shipment that was meant to fund the next 5. Emily accepted the document with a polite nod, but her eyes were already drifting elsewhere. Through the narrow glass wall that separated the operations floor from a repurposed conference room, now serving as a makeshift wildlife care unit, she could see movement, gentle, slow, fragile. Inside, rows of glass enclosures were lined along folding tables. Heat lamps glowed softly over injured or sedated animals. Oxygen tubes fed into the sides of custom pods. A pair of veterinary techs gently cleaned the wing of a macaw chick as Rachel entered to assist. Peter sat quietly near the door, not on alert, just watching. Can I? Emily asked. The port director gestured. Go ahead. She stepped through the door and into a world far removed from the steel and suspicion of the investigation center. It was warm here, humid, alive. One of the veterinarians looked up. Most of them are going to make it, she said. They were starved for airflow, but stabilized in time. Emily knelt beside Peter and ran a hand down his back. The bird Peter had saved the one barely breathing hours earlier was now upright, not strong, not safe, but surviving. Rachel joined her, voice low. A few of these will be flown to sanctuaries in Costa Rica and Brazil. Others will be sent to breeding programs with conservation approval. We'll try to give them back what was stolen. Emily nodded slowly. They didn't ask to be part of this. No, Rachel said, but they survived it. Peter laid his head on Emily's knee. She scratched behind his ear without speaking. A tech passed by, whispering to a colleague about the incoming press. The spotlight was coming. Journalists, cameras, interviews, a new narrative, the story of the brave officer and her heroic dog. Emily stood. Her back still ached, her side was sore, and the weight of everything that almost happened sat heavy in her chest. Transition. As the sound of footsteps and camera shutters began echoing down the hallway, Emily turned from the glass and looked at Peter. He didn't move, didn't flinch, because neither of them wanted applause. They wanted quiet. Just a moment, where the world wasn't watching. Snow had begun to fall just outside the windows of JFK Airport. Soft and quiet, like flakes of ash, drifting down over the frozen tarmac and idle catering trucks beyond the glass. Inside the makeshift wildlife care unit, once a corporate conference room, fluorescent lights cast an even glow over rows of recovery enclosures. No alarms, no radios crackling. Just breath. Subtle, rhythmic signs of life, returning slow and fragile, but real. Peter sat motionless near the glass. His gaze was fixed on the far corner of the room, where a barely feathered Spix's macaw chick lay nestled inside a softly lit incubator. The tiny bird was curled into itself, a thin oxygen tube threading carefully through the enclosure to help regulate its breathing. Its chest rose and fell with the faintest effort. Peter didn't blink. He didn't move. He was still but wholly present, watching, not as a dog on duty, but as a guardian of something silent and sacred. Emily leaned against the doorframe behind him. Her ribs still ached beneath the fresh stitches, every inhale reminding her of the chase, the impact. The moment instinct had taken over and protocol fell away, but the pain grounded her. It reminded her they'd done something that mattered. The door creaked gently. A small voice called out, almost shy. "Excuse me." Emily turned. A young girl, maybe 6 years old, stood just inside the doorway, clutching the edges of her puffy coat. Her mittens were slightly oversized, and her cheeks flushed from the cold. Behind her stood a woman, her mother, most likely offering an encouraging nod. The child's eyes were fixed on Peter. "Miss, can I thank your dog?" Emily smiled softly. "He's still on duty, but you can talk to him if you'd like." The girl took a few careful steps forward and crouched beside Peter without reaching out. She lowered her head respectfully and whispered, "Thank you, brave police dog." Peter slowly turned his head toward her. One ear flicked forward in acknowledgement. That was all, but it was enough. The girl's face lit up with quiet joy. Emily watched her walk back to her mother and leave. Then she moved beside Peter and crouched next to him. In the incubator, the little macaw chick gave a weak flap of its still-growing wings, as if shifting position in sleep. A faint beep from the monitoring system kept tempo with its heartbeat. Emily rested a hand on Peter's back. His fur was warm beneath her palm, still slightly damp where snow had landed earlier. "You knew," she said quietly, "right from the beginning, while the rest of us were waiting for paperwork and scans and confirmations. You already knew." Peter didn't respond, but the look in his eyes was steady, unwavering, not pride, not defiance. Just truth. "You saw what machines couldn't," Emily whispered, "what people wouldn't. You trusted your senses when no one else trusted you." She let the silence hang. Then she smiled faintly. "They'll spend the next year rewriting protocols and debating whose fault it almost was. Maybe they'll even name a clause after you, the Peter Protocol." From the hallway outside the glass wall, Rachel Vance appeared, holding a clipboard, expression gentle. Emily nodded to her but didn't rise yet. "Not yet. Let's go," she said softly to Peter. "They don't need us in front of the cameras." He stood at her side without hesitation. Together, they exited the room, passing agents in suits, technicians with hard drives, veterinarians tending to sedated animals, and officers coordinating with federal teams. No one stopped them. Some nodded, some stepped aside. All of them knew who Peter was. Cameras had begun setting up near the terminal entrance, preparing for the inevitable press conference. Journalists would want the story. 1,000 versions of it: hero dog, rogue officer, wildlife sting, near catastrophe. But Emily walked past it all. Down the side hallway, out the staff exit, into the snow-dusted quiet of the airfield's edge. The cold hit gently, not sharply, just enough to make each breath feel clean. The sun was melting behind the skyline in amber hues, stretching golden light over the runway and turning the snow a pale pink. The silence out here felt earned. Peter walked ahead of her, his paws pressing into fresh snow with purpose. Emily followed, no medals, no applause, just the sound of her boots beside his, 2 sets of prints, 2 steady rhythms in step. When they reached the patrol car, she stopped and looked at him. "You've earned it," she said. Peter turned toward her, his tail wagged once, controlled, calm, certain. She opened the passenger door and held it. "Let's go get you the biggest steak in New York, partner." Peter hopped in, settling into his spot without hesitation. As Emily rounded the car to the driver's seat, she paused. The city stretched before them, glowing faintly beneath the snowfall. Behind them, life rare. Endangered life was healing in tanks and crates that had been minutes away from disappearance. And none of it would have been possible if Peter hadn't stopped. If he'd barked and she hadn't listened. If she'd followed orders instead of trust. Some truths, she realized, couldn't be scanned. Some signals weren't detectable by algorithms or filters. They came from instinct, from faith, from the unshakable heart of a dog who refused to let evil pass unnoticed. She looked back at him once more. He met her gaze through the windshield. And in that simple exchange, no words, no gestures was everything. The story of what really happened that day wouldn't be told in the headlines, but she would carry it, and Peter already did. Narration outro viewer prompt, if adapted for video. Have you ever felt something was wrong before anyone else did? What would you have done if you were in Officer Emily's place? Follow the rules? Or trust the one partner who never let you down? If Peter's story moved you, share it. Not for fame, but for the lives that were saved because one German shepherd believed in something no scanner could see. Subscribe for more real stories about the animals who change our world. And remember, sometimes the truest heroes don't speak at all. Sometimes the difference between life and loss isn't a law or a badge or a scanner. It's a pause, a growl, a look that says, something isn't right. Peter couldn't explain what he sensed, he just knew. And Emily, when given the choice between protocol and trust, chose to listen. Because sometimes real instinct speaks louder than authority. And because of that, a shipment of silence meant for the black market turned into a room full of breathing miracles. Now, we want to hear from you. If you were in Officer Emily's shoes, would you have followed the rules or trusted your partner's instinct? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story touched you the way Peter touched ours, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of courage, connection, and the animals who change everything without saying a word. See you in the next story.